got excited for Detective Pikachu right from the very first trailer, and I finally got to watch it just a couple days ago. And I really enjoyed it, but I actually spent a good portion of the week leading up to watching the movie watching TyranitarTube's playthrough of the game. Obviously, that affected my experience of the movie, and I do want to talk about how the two compare, but that is pretty spoilery. I think that by the time this video comes out, most people who care about spoilers and are interested in the movie will probably have seen it, so I will talk about it later, but just in case some of you haven't seen the movie yet and don't want to be spoiled, I will do some spoiler-free comments first, and then I'll make a very clear spoiler warning before we go into that. Detective Pikachu is exactly the kind of movie that I have been waiting 20 years to see. But I'm glad that they actually didn't make it 20 years ago, because the Pokemon would not have looked this good. They did a great job at making the Pokemon look real. There's some opening scenes that show Pokemon out in the wild. There's like a flock of Pidgeots. They looked fantastic. The Pokemon that do look a little bit weird, I think it's mostly just because we're used to seeing them as cartoon characters, and in that style there is less detail, which means that we get to fill in that detail with our own interpretations of things. Jigglypuff is one that a lot of people complained looked too fuzzy, but the Pokédex talks about Jigglypuff's fur, or at least it talks about Wigglytuff's fur, so presumably Jigglypuff also has that fur. So the designs of the Pokemon in the movie are actually very consistent, both with the official designs and with the lore and what's in the Pokédex. That is mostly a good thing. Sometimes it can be a bit of a bad thing because Pokemon have weird anatomy, so sometimes their heads look too big and so on. But honestly, I wouldn't have expected them to do it any differently. I would not have expected them to change the design of the Pokemon. Something that both versions of Detective Pikachu, both the movie and the game, did really well is showing the role of the Pokemon in the world. Most people have a single partner Pokemon, and the Pokemon are integrated into the city life. A lot of times they help people work. And I feel like this is more realistic to how the people of the Pokemon world would actually live with their Pokemon, instead of the very trainer and battle-focused interpretation that we see in the main series games. The movie actually makes a point of saying that Rhyme City is special in how it treats Pokemon compared to the other regions, but the game doesn't, so I feel like it could just be that the game, because it gets to show a lot more day-to-day stuff of city life, that it gets to show those relationships, whereas the games, because they focus more on the battling, they show different things. The story of the movie is a pretty traditional Pokemon story if you think of the kinds of stories that are told in like the anime movies. At least the first 4 movies, those are the only ones that I've really seen. It's a lot like those in spirit. It doesn't have a really big focus on battling, which is kind of too bad. I would have liked to see more Pokemon battles, but it's understandable, and it's also refreshing and nice not to have a movie that is entirely action. And we did get some battles which were maybe a little bit slow, but I think overall pretty well done. And you know what? Seeing Pokemon battling in live action is one of the things that I've been waiting 20 years to see, so I was very happy to see that. There was even a reference to the stadium announcer. I loved that. But it isn't a perfect movie. I will talk more about what I didn't like about it after the spoiler warning, but something that stood out to me is that sometimes the movie seemed unsure of its audience and of what kind of movie it was trying to be. There are parts of Detective Pikachu where it gets pretty dark or pretty emotional, but then there are also scenes that seem kind of ridiculous and even a little bit overacted. It's like if you took an Avengers movie, like say Age of Ultron for example, and then you also spliced into it scenes from like Sky High. It's that kind of jarring. It's also a movie that is very clearly for Pokemon fans. There are tons of references, tons and tons of fan service, and then it also has sequences with really heavy and sometimes awkward exposition and giving a lot of detail that we as Pokemon fans already know. Here's something that's related. The trailers showed a lot of Pokemon saying their own names the way they do in the anime, and actually also in the Detective Pikachu games. They also say their names there. And that's not something that I'm a big fan of, but I get it, because even though it isn't part of the game canon, it is still a pretty well-known Pokemon trait. But then, in the actual movie, tons of Pokemon just make animalistic noises. I mean, Pikachu saying its own name is pretty much just a branding thing now. Pikachu just sounds the same in every media. Pika Pika! But other than that, it seemed pretty arbitrary which Pokemon say their names and which ones make noises. And I kind of think it might have just been the trailer ones say their names. So like Ludicolo, for example, it literally only appears in that one scene that is in the trailer, and it says its own name. Whereas Bulbasaur had a lot more screen time, but it didn't have a line in the trailer, so it just makes noises. It makes these adorable chirps. That was probably the reason that Bulbasaur was my favorite of the starters in the movie. But in the end, just having some say their names and some make noises seemed pretty inconsistent. All that being said, Detective Pikachu is definitely worth watching, and I'm very excited for more movies like it. I've already heard rumors of a sequel being in the works, possibly with the same characters, possibly not. I've also heard people speculating about a Pokemon Ranger movie, and I'd really like to see that, more of these kind of alternative perspectives of the Pokemon world. And of course, I would really like to see a more traditional trainer story as well, something like a Red and Blue situation. Yeah, I'm just really excited for more Pokemon Cinematic Universe movies. Now, let's talk spoilers. Spoiler warning! We finally saw a Pokemon lay an egg! That didn't happen, unfortunately. That would have been good, though. Why was Catherine Newton's character Lucy rather than Emilia, who is her equivalent, basically, from the game? I mean, they are different characters, but they serve essentially the same purpose in the story of sort of being Tim's helper. Emilia is a reporter at GNN, whereas Lucy is an unpaid intern at CNM. And that's another thing. GNN, CNM, why did they change the network name? What difference does that make? Emilia also has no Pokemon, whereas Lucy has her Psyduck, but otherwise, they're the same character. I guess that's not really a spoiler, though. So this could be like a buffer zone for people who might have watched for too long. What is a spoiler, though, is Ditto. It really bothered me that Ditto didn't change its eyes. That was supposed to be a thing, a gimmick of that one Ditto in the anime, but because it was so charming and people loved it, it basically became canonical not only for merchandise, but now also for the whole Pokemon cinematic universe, presumably. But even more interesting is that this Ditto is seen impersonating humans, just like the Ditto 5 that we just talked about last week. And like the Ditto 5, this Ditto doesn't talk. There is a line in the movie that refers to Ditto as a genetic experiment, and unfortunately I don't remember the line well enough to remember whether it was referring to all Ditto being a genetic experiment, in which case it kind of confirms, or at least it supports, the theory that Ditto was part of the Mewtwo genetic experiments. Or if that line was specifically referring to that Ditto in the movie being made by PCL. And because we saw PCL have evolution enhancement experiments, it's possible, if that's the case, that that Ditto can transform into humans because of their experiments. But considering that this movie was announced all the way back in 2016, it's possible, I won't say likely, but it's at least possible, that the Ditto 5 were added to Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon in order to kind of establish in the game canon Ditto transforming into people. But what I really want to talk about, and the reason that I decided to watch TyranitarTube's entire playthrough, was the story. Because as it turns out, the story of the movie is completely different from that of the game. I mean, a lot of the setup is pretty similar, but it just unfolds in a completely different direction. And having some differences is definitely understandable because they're trying to condense a game that had 20 plus hours of episodic gameplay into a single less than 2-hour movie. And I really did appreciate all the curveballs that the movie threw at us. At those of us who knew the game story, there were tons of twists and surprises even for us. But the thing is, I think I liked the game story better. For those of you that don't know the game story, I'll try to do a quick rundown. First of all, Harry has been missing for 2 months, not presumed dead for a week. And Tim goes to Rhyme City specifically to look for his father. He meets up with Pikachu, and together they do some detective work to try to find out more about Harry. This leads them to PCL, a Pokemon research lab, doing some pretty positive work. But there they discover R, which is what Harry was investigating. Now, R was originally intended as a sort of miracle drug, something based on Mew's cells to basically heal any kind of Pokemon problem. But whoever supplied the researcher with the cells actually gave them Mewtwo's cells instead, and it's a bit unclear in the game whether that was an accident or whether it was on purpose on part of the supplier or what that purpose might have been. But because Mewtwo's cells have that Berserk gene, that thing that was introduced in Generation 2, it instead causes Pokemon to become stronger and lose control and go wild. This research that they found is 10 years old, but they also see some evidence that someone was still working on it. And ultimately, they discover that the person behind the whole thing is Roger Clifford, a producer at GNN who wanted to use R-related stories to propel his company, gain control of the news cycle, and ultimately gain political power. At the end of the game, Mewtwo meets with Pikachu to collect his stolen cells that they had recovered. And he gives Pikachu a choice, but we never see what that choice was or what choice Pikachu made. And the game ends with Detective Pikachu, still as a Pikachu, meeting up with Tim to continue looking for Harry. There's a few reasons why I liked that better than the story that we got in the movie. For one, it feels more grounded and more believable because the motives are more political. I mean, Howard Clifford has a fine motive for himself. He has a disability that he wants to get rid of, but it doesn't make any sense why he would assume that the solution for him is also better for everyone else. I also really liked having Mewtwo as a positive character who is not often on screen. Mewtwo has been both victimized and villainized enough times, so it was really nice having him as a positive character who is driving the plot, but from the background. And then there's the whole mind merge and body merge situation. And a mind merge is okay, like that's understandable and plausible given Mewtwo's power. That seems like the kind of thing that Mewtwo's psychic ability would be able to do. But the body merge is a stretch. First of all, what happened to all the bodies? Why did they just disappear? Why didn't Howard's body disappear when he merged with Mewtwo? Why is Pikachu the only one who seems to lose his memory because of the body merge? And if Pikachu gave his body to save Harry's mind, why is it that Harry's body appears to be just fine at the end? I do like that this whole thing sort of references Bill's transporter, but it doesn't really do it well. Because Bill's mind does get put onto a Nidorino, at least that's what's implied, but the bodies are kept separate. You can actually see them come out of different sides of the transporter. And that is my biggest issue, but there is also the ending. In the game, you never find out what happened to Harry. There are clues that Pikachu might be Harry. Someone says that Pikachu only started drinking coffee after Harry disappeared. There's the whole choice that Mewtwo gives him at the end, but you never know for sure. And Detective Pikachu is still a Pikachu at the end. The movie makes the whole thing very explicit, and you even get to meet Harry as a human in the end. And I guess in a way that is a more satisfying conclusion because they were looking for Harry and they found Harry, but to me it feels like a sort of botched version of the ending to the Speed Racer movie. In Speed Racer, which is a fantastic movie, by the way, you absolutely should watch it if you haven't already, Speed spends the entire movie wondering if Racer X is actually his own brother, Rex. This is also a constant question in the anime, but at the end of the movie, X takes off his mask to show Speed that he looks nothing like Rex. Except that the audience find out that X actually is Rex, except that he had facial reconstruction surgery to protect his identity and therefore his family. So this preserves the state of the anime of Speed not knowing about it, but it also gives the audience a very satisfying conclusion. An option that I see here for Detective Pikachu along those lines would be for Mewtwo to talk to Pikachu alone without Tim there and reveal that Pikachu is Harry. That way, the audience and Pikachu/Harry know about it, but Tim doesn't. And then the film closes with Pikachu not having decided whether he's going to tell Tim or not. Maybe because he bonded with Tim better as a Pikachu than he did as himself. There's a lot more that I could talk about, but it's mostly little things, and I don't want to make it seem like I disliked this movie. I did really enjoy it, although other people that were with me who didn't know the game story did seem to also enjoy it more. But I really liked it. I will probably see it again and probably also own it on DVD. So if you watched the movie, let me know in the comments what you thought of the movie as a whole, but then more specifically, what you thought of the plot and the ending specifically. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and share it with your friends. If you're new here, please subscribe for more Pokemon videos every Friday. I'm Umbreon Libris. I'll see you in the next chapter. Oh yeah, I was supposed to walk out. Did you catch that Ash and Misty cameo? Actually, I shouldn't say that because, I don't know, maybe there was one and I didn't catch it.